Would you believe that the entire story was completely different? The original conception of Jujutsu Kaisen was called Jujutsu Kaisen, where Yuji wasn't even supposed to be the main character. Rather, he just had a supporting role, with some weak relation to Sukuna, not being his twin or nephew at all. Instead, Megumi, who was called Wanibuchi, was the protagonist, with his sister also being introduced as early as chapter 1. But the crazy thing is, Meguna was a thing before it even happened, as Gege wrote the storyboards for Sukuna taking over his body. The one primary difference was that the king gave his vessels devilish horns. He would meet GOJO in an encounter where he was told to buzz off because, GOJO wants to save lives. Sukuna would initially think he's sick or crazy, but similar to the original manga, their rivalry would begin when Sukuna realized he was a sorcerer. In fact, the whole Culling Games was thought up way earlier than it was initiated, as Jujutsu Kaisen was supposed to be set in that environment from the very beginning. But once Gege reread it, he scrapped the whole idea. Why? Well, because Megumi was just too boring. I mean, having a basic look with a monotone attitude and a dull backstory doesn't really help. So Gege decided to swap the character configuration, making Itadori the main lead. He didn't want to change Megumi's character and believed that Yuji, who he had already cooked up, was more adaptable and straightforward for a shonen manga. Gege literally wanted a simpleton who would do something just for the sake of doing it. Like when Itadori chooses to save somebody, it doesn't have to be for some deep reason, which allows the story to move forward quite easily. Another aspect of his versatility allows the audience to resonate with his reaction of how the story unfolds. For instance, the rules of the Culling Games. Yuji's straightforwardness would admit he didn't understand a thing. This would then allow some of the readers to think, okay, I guess if Yuji doesn't get it, then I don't need to either, and then can move on with the story. Another huge change from the original plot was inspired from Bleach, where Megumi's character, though remained the same, adopted a role similar to that of Rukia, along with having a contrasting view of justice compared to Ichigo. In fact, the whole framework of the protagonist being forced into a new world was based from this. Ichigo chooses to become a Shinigami to save Rukia. Likewise, Itadori ingests Sukuna's fingers and becomes part of the Jujutsu world to save his friends and Megumi. But Bleach wasn't the only inspiration. Rather, Naruto also played a major role. Like, I'm pretty sure everybody already knew this, as it was pretty obvious. Naruto and Kurama was used to come up with Yuta and Rika's relationship, and of course Yuji's and Sukuna's. But to make things different, Gege ensured that Sukuna will never be compatible with Yuji. Furthermore, Gege wanted to simplify the story, so he purposely avoided any introduction of the main characters from volume 0, including Yuta. But he still had to add GOJO at the start due to his mentor role. When the time was right, Gege decided to make a prequel volume 0 story to go hand in hand with his newly fleshed out version of Jujutsu Kaisen. In regards to fleshing out the main trio though, Gege stated he was inspired by the 3-man team from Naruto, so he introduced Nobara and always had a rough idea on their conception but hadn't mapped out all the details because he was afraid of losing the ability to depict them in a multifaceted way. Yet, he was also worried of not having enough planned out, as it would then cause loss of coherence in their development. So he aimed for a balance, where with Nobara, he already decided on her family background and stories of her mother and grandmother before her joining the school. In regards to Fushiguro, well, yeah, he always wanted Megumi to live in a constant midlife crisis, waiting to engage in a death battle.
I've got something up my sleeve you couldn't even possibly expect. Mahoraga! Help! Help! Help me!
No, but seriously, Megumi was already fleshed out due to his role in Jujutsu Kaisen. As for Itadori, there were several parts which he deemed was important to pre-plan, such as why did Sukuna's fingers exist in the school? So to tie things properly, the idea that everything was orchestrated by Kinjaku came into existence. Other things were actually made up on the fly, like when Gege's editor at the time, Mr. Katayama, asked for Itadori's finishing move, Octomy drew a blank until he eventually thought of the iconic left, right, good night, divergent fist, and then the black flash. In fact, it was originally only supposed to be unique to itadori, but Gege changed it into being a universal technique where though it had an accidental aspect, it could still be used consecutively, which allowed for a turning point in battle. He liked it so much that he made it to be usable by enemies to help add tension. Gege also wanted to make sure that Yuji wasn't like a typical main shonen lead, who aspired to be someone great like a Hokage or Pirate King. Thematically, the story needed to stay grim and pretty depressing, hence why Itadori right from the beginning questioned his purpose of life and what makes a good death. But hey, Gege isn't completely sadistic, as one of his biggest changes was with Nanami, who instead of being a Jujutsu sorcerer, he was initially conceptualized to be a curse user who killed civilians. What? But that's not the only thing that changed. Along with Yuji's and Megami's surname, the whole idea of Yuji living till now was supposed to be different. For instance, though Choso and Yuji were always planned to be siblings, it was initially accompanied with an idea of Choso killing Yuji and then taking on his role. I guess this would have happened somewhere between chapter 105 and 106. Thing is, Gege always wanted Yuji to die, which makes sense as in an earlier interview he revealed that Jujutsu Kaisen will end with either Yuji dying or everyone dying. But Yuji's death is actually the crux of the story, being somewhat a goal that he set out for himself as early as chapter 1. So the story ending with Yuji's death whilst taking on Sukuna as he had originally agreed to would be quite poetic, bringing everything full circle. In fact, when it comes to death, Octomi explained he is only interested in killing off characters that have the appeal to make readers sad. Hence why he stated that characters like Mei Mei will never die, basically saying she is mid and no one cares if she did.
We don't care.
This type of writing gives greater meaning to the story as a whole, where it puts an aspect of realism into fiction. I mean, in reality, no one is actually immune to death, where in actuality, Murphy's Law is set into place. Plus, great stories and character arcs are followed by great deaths, hence why Game of Thrones was so mind-blowing, and even momentous moments in anime caught our attention from Gurren Lagann, Marineford, and of course Code Geass. But this would go into the insane confirmation on how Gege had always decided to kill off Nanami and Nobara in the Shibuya incident, way before the arc was even written. Both of them already had a place in the hearts of the audience, and it was the perfect moment for Gege to leave such a great impact. In doing so, we could understand what Yuji and Megami were feeling, as their loss and pain was reciprocated by us.